it wasn't the president who came out and said how much he deplored what happened. It was General Keith Kellogg, who was his man on Ukraine. And so while Keir Starmer said something, I think Macron said something, I think heads of state have said something. In our case, for the reasons you point out, this is something embarrassing potentially for Trump, who has been becoming a buddy to Putin.
Our top story this evening, and at least 34 people have been killed and dozens wounded after Russia launched a ballistic missile attack on the northern Ukrainian city of Sumy this morning, as worshippers headed to church on Palm Sunday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a statement earlier that the drone attacks continue and only pressure, only decisive action can change this. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has condemned the attack as appalling. Well, Jim Townsend is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO and joins us on Times Radio tonight. Jim, thank you for being with us. I guess the use of ballistic missiles here suggests that these civilians attending church were the intended target of these strikes.
I sure think so. And I think we have to remember that Steve Witkoff, who was President Trump's negotiator for the Russians for some type of peace agreement, just met for hours with Putin in the Kremlin a day or two before this attack. So I think this is something where not only was he hoping to cause mayhem and death in Ukraine, but he was sending a signal to the United States too, which is don't get so cocky that you think you've got me over a barrel.
And just on the practicalities here, there are air defences in Ukraine. Kyiv is perhaps more protected than some of these further reaches of the sort of eastern and the north of Ukraine. But why didn't air defences intercept these missiles?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not sure. It could be they're running low of ammunition. It could be there were other targets that were coming in that occupied the air defense. There's a number of different reasons, and I think we just are so upset about the tragedy that unfolded because those missiles leaked through and caused the deaths that they did.
And it's also possible, isn't it, Jim, for F-16 jets to intercept missiles like these. And again, I mean, maybe as much as a warning or a sort of shot across the bow for Donald Trump on Russia's part, Zelensky could perhaps point at this and say, look, we need more support with these fighter jets.
Well, that's right. I think they need more air defense, certainly, whether it's going to be from additional F-16s or whether it's going to be more ammunition, more missiles for their Patriot systems or whatever it is. Obviously, there was a leak of these ballistic missiles coming through the net. And we've got to figure out what caused that and how can we plug those leaks.
Do you think that message, in particular in America, Jim, obviously it's being heard in Europe, but in America, do you think that somebody somewhere in the White House is looking at this and thinking the solution is better air defences for Ukraine?
I doubt it. I think the White House is all consumed with themselves. They're consumed with the tariffs. They're consumed with things that don't have to do with Ukraine. So I hate to say it, but I don't think there's anyone necessarily in the White House who's concerned about air defense for Ukraine.
Is there a significance to it being Palm Sunday?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that sharpened that message. The targeteers there in Russia know that is Palm Sunday. Certainly Putin does. And he knew that people would be congregating in that spot. That spot in Sumy is where a lot of the city congregates for lots of different reasons. In this case, they were coming back from church. He knew that. That strike was aimed for these people coming out of church on Palm Sunday and sending a message to the United States and to Ukraine as well that Putin doesn't care, and he's not looking for peace. And if we want him to look for peace, we're going to have to give him a lot of concessions right now because peace is not what's topmost on his mind.
Okay. On that point, President Zelensky in his statement said, let me just bring you this quote. He said, every Russian ballistic missile, every cruise missile strikes not only our people and our communities, but also diplomacy and the political effort to end this war. Does it strike it backwards? Is that what Zelensky is suggesting there, Jim?
Well, I think Zelensky is trying to make a case also to the United States that, look, Ukraine, Zelensky, I'm in it for the long term in terms of looking for peace. I'm all about peace. I've done what you wanted me to do, which is to be a man of peace and to go for a long-term peace settlement with Russia. It is Putin who is the one who doesn't want peace. It is Putin who wants war. And if you should be putting pressure on anyone, it should be Putin. So he's trying to make this case that Zelensky, is doing everything that Trump wanted him to, and it's Putin who is upsetting the apple cart here.
And Zelensky's point, I suppose, as much as anything, is that these strikes, they hinder diplomacy, and they strike diplomacy, and they make that peace, a possible ceasefire, more distant and prospect.
That's right.
Is there an alternative to that, though, Jim, which is that this is embarrassing for the White House? It's embarrassing for a president who said that he was going to solve this problem on day one. And the harder that Putin strikes, the more determined the White House becomes to solve this problem.
Well, it's interesting that it wasn't the president who came out and said how much he deplored what happened. It was General Keith Kellogg, who was his man on Ukraine. And so while Keir Starmer said something, I think Macron said something, I think heads of state have said something. In our case, for the reasons you point out, this is something embarrassing potentially for Trump, who has been becoming a buddy to Putin and doesn't want to come out himself vocally and criticize Putin. So this is something where I think your point is a good one. This is bad news for Trump. This is happening. Trump is going to have to turn to some pretty coercive methods now if he wants to try to get Putin to the table. And right now, Putin's not playing ball, and Trump does not want to escalate things. So he's trying to keep himself distant from what happened with these strikes.
Right, that's interesting. Distant. I mean, my next question was going to be in the context of having not heard from him, tied up with other stuff, very clearly tied down at the moment by tariffs and other such matters. I wondered if perhaps he'd given up on Ukraine.
I don't know if he's given up as much as he is just doing other things. You know, he gets distracted. He gets frustrated and says, "Well, I've had enough with that. I'm moving on to something else." So you might call that giving up, but I think right now he has moved on to things that are occupying the headlines in the United States. It's these tariffs. It's trying to figure out the way ahead. And I think Ukraine, he has left to Steve Witkoff, his negotiator, and to Keith Kellogg, his liaison with Ukraine.
Okay.
He's washing his hands of it.
Okay, Jim, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. Very insightful. Lovely to have your company. Jim Townsend, who's former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO, with us on Times Radio tonight.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Sorry. So,
Do you have a reaction to Russia's Palm Sunday attack?
I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake, but I think it's a horrible thing. I think the whole war is a horrible thing. I think the war is, for that war to have started, is an abuse of power. This country would have never allowed that war to have started if I were president.
When you say they made a mistake in the attack, you said they made a mistake. You were told they made a mistake. Do you mean it was unintentional?
They made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them. This is Biden's war. This is not my war.